One of the most common questions I get, whether I'm on a podcast, at a studio, or here on YouTube, is should I start a YouTube channel as an engineer? Does it actually lead to more work? The truth is, this platform completely transformed my career, but probably not in the way most people think. I've been a mastering engineer for around 12 years full-time. In the last 12-18 months, earned 2 Grammy nominations, one at the Grammys, one at the Latin Grammys, worked on over 6,000 projects, and all in that time, somehow 40,000 of you beautiful people decided to hit subscribe, which is crazy to me. So for this 40K Q&A, I wanted to sit down, grab all the questions you've been sending in about career mindset and longevity, networking and business, mastering process and techniques, and I left the absolute best to last. Could Jesus microwave a burrito so hot he couldn't eat it? Yes, I'm going to answer that at the end, but before we do, let's dive in to why we're here. Should engineers, producers start a YouTube channel? The reason why people ask this is they want to know, will it impact my business? Will I get more work from doing it? Now, I started this YouTube channel thinking I could get viral views and more projects and build my business off the back of it, as in the mixing and mastering business off the back of it, and that's not the case. So I wanted to quantify this for you. Of the last 100 songs released from the studio, 4 of them were from clients who found me via YouTube. Now, those are 4 amazing clients. I've had hundreds of clients actually from YouTube, but it only represents a very small percent. Some of them independent artists, some of them are major records. The stuff for Dice and Bus, that whole crew, that was Mech McKenna, the producer who got me on board with all the T-pop records, the Latin Grammy nomination for Michelle Maciel, from Jordi Guillem, the multi-platinum Lex GTK record, from Quicksilver, those guys are awesome over in Greece. Those opportunities came through YouTube. But there's probably 5 or 6 of those sort of opportunities that have happened over the last 12 years. So it hasn't been the crux of building a sustainable business. It's led to great opportunities and exciting people to meet. So how exactly did the YouTube channel transform my career? Well, it allowed me to migrate my value set from one-to-one service, which I do when I master records or mix records, to providing value through helping people at scale. I can make a video on one topic, and instead of it being through a DM from one person asking a question and responding back, it can be to thousands of people or tens of thousands of people. And that opens the floodgate for opportunities outside of the realm of mixing and mastering, which has been incredible to be able to make an impact on this industry. Even though it's a very small impact, it's me having a purpose and fulfilling something that's outside of just myself or just my clients. It's for a greater, better purpose to help others, which is really fulfilling. People on YouTube, outside of people who have hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers, they're not really doing it for the money. They're doing it because it is a pleasure. And that's what this is for me. This is my creative outlet to share with the world, things I really love and that I can bring value to. And for you, if you're asking yourself whether you should start a YouTube channel as a producer or engineer, if you're passionate about sharing your journey, about learning through creating, yes, you should. This has just been a beautiful cathartic experience to make these sort of videos where I get to share and help others. If you're doing it to get more clients or make money, go get a real estate license. Go get a license in insurance broking. Don't start a YouTube channel. Now, I want to move on to your questions, and we're going to start with career, mindset, and longevity. So this question is, when clients says, sorry, we can't accept the mix or master, then left, what are you going to do? So this has happened to me, and this happens to me. I'm not going to say this will never happen to me again, or any other professional for that matter. The reality is, when it comes to a creative project or any project, even if it was just accounting or filing taxes, the crux of it is we are all human beings that are very dynamic, and the core of avoiding these situations is being very disciplined with your communication style and ability to listen empathetically to your clients. So that way you don't miss small cues and opportunities to provide value to them. So that's the first thing. Communication is critical. With that, we're humans. You are not going to go into a room and introduce yourself to 1,000 people, and 1,000 people absolutely get along with you 100%. There are going to be a few people whose personalities, whose mannerisms, or just by nature, you will never get along with. You'll never agree with. And the same goes with the service-based industry. You will do a lot of projects, and every now and then, there'll be a misalignment despite everybody's best efforts to communicate incredibly well, and that happens. And it's not to react emotionally or get upset about it or try and win them back. The best game plan to do in this is to allow maybe 24 hours to lapse, respond with empathy and respect for any decisions people make. But post-game, so think of this like a post-football match review or sports review, go back through your emails, go back through your communications, and try and identify any communications that might have hinted at things that you may have missed, that the client might not have been happy with, but they brushed off early on in the stages, and keep notes for yourself to learn from these sort of patterns, because we're not going to always, even with our best intention and good listening and good communication, we're going to miss things. We're not always going to get everything 100% right. And it's important to use these opportunities not to be bitter, but to learn. And whilst you might get down in the dumps, and this comes to the mindset side of it, you might get that rejection and feel bad about it, and that's normal. Know that it is only a small instance in time. Some of my biggest clients came from people who initially rejected a project I had done for them years ago, like 3-5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Like, would work on a project, it didn't work out, and then things have changed, or times have changed, or who they're working with has changed, and they've come back and they've worked with me, and it's water for ducks back. We're going gangbusters on records. So just remember, these are micro instances that happen. They don't have to define your career, but how you interpret them will define how you grow as an engineer. So accept the L's, but don't be bitter. Like, you can't be bitter about it, and use it as an opportunity to learn. And that actually just ties directly to the balance between perseverance and knowing when to move on, which is the next question. What's the line between giving up and perseverance? Perseverance is about the goal, not necessarily the path. So it's not necessarily how you do something, it's about what you're aiming to get towards, whether that's in your career or a mixing project you're doing with a client or something you're trying to achieve in your life. You have to be driven by a goal, not romanticizing the process, like romanticizing how it should be. You have to be able to adapt and be dynamic. So that's part of being smart when you're persevering and, doing a stint of work, or you've got a huge album to work through, and you've got in your mind exactly how you're going to do it. But then, and this is now I'm starting to tell us a bit of a story about an album I worked on. I'm not going to say names, but then producers start changing beats, and new vocalists come in, and new BVs come in, and you've mixed half the record, and half the other record that you've finished, you're remixing because things are coming in differently. And whilst that's not the perfect situation, you need to adapt. Perseverance isn't about hitting your head against a wall trying to make like something work because you think it's the way it should be. It's about focusing on what is the goal and how can you adapt and manipulate and work your way around situations to get to that goal. Not manipulate in a bad way, by the way, just like manipulate yourself to think differently. And that lesson applies to mastering and business. And it's why I'm constantly like using this analogy of game review, like post-game review, where if I'm struggling with something, if there's an L on the board, I look back to it to learn. And that's this next question. What's the most valuable thing you've learned this year regarding mastering /business? So I'm going to give you 2 lessons, one for the mastering side, one for the business side. So the biggest lesson I've had this year when it's come to mastering is that the chaff is getting cut straight from the wheat. I think that's the right saying. Let me just make sure that is. One moment. Chaff cut from the wheat. Is that it? The chaff cut from the wheat. By this I mean, as a mastering engineer and as technology is progressing, number one, there's a lot more people offering mastering services, and in that mix, there are a lot of people doing really exceptional work, and there are a lot of people doing exceptionally bad work. And this isn't to throw shade, but this is just the nature of it. So what's happened is producers and mixers have become more self-sufficient to be able to master their own stuff if they can't find a mastering engineer that can meet their needs. So the whole middle of the mastering market is sort of being left out to dry. There's not much mastering work for people who aren't keeping up and doing their best work. So you've got producers and engineers doing their own stuff. And then you've got the top of the crop and great mastering engineers who are doing great work. And that's sort of like the ballpark I'm trying to compete in, not in like, I'm going to beat you kind of way, but like play with the big dogs. In that sense, I'm finding a huge divide. I'm thinking like back to when I started pre-AI mastering, like 2013-ish. That was what was happening at the time, because every person with a cracked version of Ozone with their laptop was a mastering engineer mastering records for $20 a pop. And that put a bad taste in a lot of producer and engineers' mouth, and it created a big divide in the marketplace. And then that divide, after people realized that wasn't going to work, I saw like 4 mastering studios in Australia open up and close down, mastering studios open up and close down in that like first 3-4 years of my business, because they came in hot, super cheap, not doing great work, and they were cut. So what I'm trying to say with this is the dynamics of mastering right now, for what I've learned in 2025, is that if you're a producer or engineer, get very, very, very proficient at being able to do it for yourself, because clients' budgets won't always allow for a mastering engineer. And that said, as producers and engineers, create relationships with really good mastering engineers. So when you can have access or budget for a great mastering engineer, you can use them. For the mastering engineers out there, my advice to you is to not slow down and keep pushing yourself, keep pushing one another. I love being connected with quite a few mastering engineers who are incredibly passionate and will challenge my thinking, and that pushes me to challenge my own thinking. And then when I hear them say things, I learn, but I also challenge back, and that allows everybody to grow. So yeah, that's on the mastering side. On the business side, what's changed in 2025? I'm not sure. I think it's pretty much 2024. For myself, I've developed in parallel to my business the education side of what I'm doing, through this channel, through the newsletter, through the masterclasses. And that's been really nice to see that sort of like little uptick of connecting with more people and helping more people out. But business-wise, at least for 25, it's been so much. If anything, business-wise, subscriptions and digital subscriptions have sort of ramped up quite a bit, so that's a bit of an overhead to deal with, but nothing major, like major shifts, so to speak. But that's only in a 1-year timeline. When we start thinking about the next 5 to 10 years, it leads into this next question. How do you see your business changing in the next 5 to 10 years? When I got this question, I thought about it, because I've got my mastering and mixing business, which is growing, great. Atmos is a thing on the fringes for me looking at the moment, which I might spend next year doing a case study to develop out in public on the YouTube channel, chase a business model for it and document the feasibility of it. I think that's really good to do, because outside of other engineers I know in the States doing a lot of label work in Atmos, I also know a lot of peers who have invested in Atmos and not made their money back over the last 3 to 4 years. So it might be a good case study to sort of dive into and look at the outlay, look at the demand, and week after week or month by month, relay back on the YouTube channel exactly what's happening there. But again, that's a fringe to the business. When I'm thinking 5 to 10 years, that's sort of like a micro project that may or may not. I'm not placing my bets on that being a major thing in my business. The education side is great, but again, that's sort of like it's a slow grower, which I'm happy to be there, but I don't see it as the main shift. What I do see is I really enjoy the way I work as a mastering engineer. I think my clients appreciate what I bring to projects. Other professionals appreciate the detail. What I'd like to see in the next 5 to 10 years is similar to what Katie Tavini's done over in the UK, where she's got like a collective of mastering engineers that work under an umbrella. I think it's like Jungle something Studio or something. Welcome Jungle. I can't remember the name. Not Welcome to the Jungle, Guns N' Roses, but she's got a really cool setup of team of trusted peers, which I think all share similar ethos to one another, which is great when it comes to mastering. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to mirror something like that, where she's got her way of mastering and doing her thing, and that's cool. But for me, I would like to maybe in the next 5 to 10 years build something out similar, where there are several engineers who I work very closely with to build them up as individuals, but also reflect a lot of the qualities and values that I've learned to put into projects for my clients, and open that up over the door over the next decade. It's a concept, and it's something that I've dabbled back and forth with for a while, because if I were to do it, I'm very, 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 very very concerned about the client on the other side and making sure they're getting something incredible. So yeah, that I think is probably, if anything's going to move a large swing in the next 5 to 10 years for myself, it would be aiming to execute on something like that. For those of you who are chasing growth, whether it's in your country or outside of it, I got this next question from somebody over in Italy. I'd like to move outside of Italy to pursue a Dolby Atmos career. Where do I start? Well, here's the first thing. Have a holiday. Go to LA. Okay, if Dolby Atmos is anywhere, it's in LA, not just because of for music. There's film, there's TV, there's a lot of media going on there. That is the media center of the world in terms of entertainment. The reason why I say holidays, don't move your whole life for it. Head out, connect with people, learn from people, show your interests, volunteer, try get a feel for where the opportunity is and how people speak about what they're doing and whatnot, and then make a decision. My negative sort of view on this is that I would hedge my bets against moving entire country for a Dolby Atmos mixing career, which you don't already have. So if you're looking to, like, it's number one, it's very niche. It is a possibility it could work out, absolutely, but it's very niche. You're going in without the backing of having an established career into a different scene where there are people with established careers and connections to people who are willing to work with them that are local and trusted. So it's a bit difficult. The positive spin to this is that why I would encourage somebody to do this is because you never know what tangent or split in the road may happen. You might go somewhere with the intention of Dolby Atmos mixing career, and you might find yourself as a music director for a TV series. I don't know, but I'm just trying to say, as long as you're open-minded to new opportunities and allowing things to, or be observant of things happening around you and your connections and your network, things happening around you and value you can provide to others, something serendipitous may happen. I think that's more likely than just pigeonholing yourself into one very specific niche and trying to make that happen. I'm probably not the right person to ask that question to be honest, but that's just my view. And ultimately, it will come down to who you're connected with, and let's talk about that. Let's get into connections, networking, YouTube, and business, and that gets to the next question. Hey, Nicholas, how do you approach artists you like to work with? To be honest, I don't approach artists I'd like to work with. As primarily a mastering business, my main clientele are other producers, engineers, and labels. I will fanboy artists because I really like their fucking music. And that probably comes off a bit weird because I have a mastering account. I'm messaging them like, this is a fucking vibe. But I won't chase. There's been a couple of artists where I just love their project and I'm like, guys, what are you working on? I'd love to be involved. I tend to avoid that unless I really feel passionately about this particular artist, because my business isn't focused around serving artists directly as a majority. It's about mixing engineers and producers. So let me migrate to that. Well, what happens if there's an engineer or a producer I really want to work with? How do I reach out to them? What do I do? Well, the first thing is, the reason I'd want to work with one of them is because they share similar values, similar projects creatively. Like, they've got a sound I love. They're a good person. They're a great hang. And ultimately, it's not even about going, hey, send me something to work on. It's about, and this I've spoken about on the Loud AF Club podcast, is I just want to listen to them. I want to give them a platform and an opportunity to connect, to talk, so I can learn. Even if I don't get a job out of it, I might learn something incredible and amazing from them because they're experiencing something and they ask me a question or they want an opinion, or I've experienced something that they're going through for the first time, whether it's something about tuning their room or their subwoofers or something, and I can help them. And it's through those connections and bonds and builds of trust that sometimes things transpire in the form of work. But ultimately, I'm not necessarily going down the rabbit hole of getting in every engineer and producer's DMs to go, hey bro, send me something. And to be honest, I've done that before, but it's I'd rather have a great positive relationship with somebody rather than close the door off completely, putting them in a position where they don't have anything to send me, or they don't want to send me anything, or, you know, like, that's just been my experience. I'd rather be cool with somebody, be a good hang, make sure, you know, like, I'm listening and learning in the same respect, just respecting the other person rather than trying to fish for shit. Anyway, and then we're going to get into this next question, which is really interesting. Do you ever produce music of your own? Is that how you got started? Currently, I don't produce any music of my own. I tried to produce a couple of singles and they were abysmal. When I get to 50k followers, I might release them to the public. But where I got started was recording. I loved recording myself, my friends, in a band, and I loved drumming. But once I got into the studio and I was just in the studio every day, like every single day, Monday to Friday, with the exception of holidays and family stuff and whatnot, from Monday to Friday, since 2012, I've been in the studio. And that's where my ass has been sat, mixing and mastering, not producing, so it's not really my thing. Next question. Why the KH310s? Have you ever felt tempted to upgrade to ATC, PMCs, or keys? No, but I have been tempted to get the keys. I'll tell you this story and then I'll talk about the ATC and the PMCs. It's Melbourne Audio Trade Show. This would have been 2017, 2016, thereabouts. The Key Company have got a display in one of the rooms at SAE in Melbourne. It's a very small room. It's almost a cube. And I'm thinking, why would any speaker company accept to showcase their speakers in here? So I got in, sat down. They sounded incredible. The Keys. Now, This is before I had the Neumanns, mind you. I got the Neumanns in 2017, so this would have had to be in 2016. Because I was actually looking at the time. Yep, that's right. It was 2016. I got the Neumanns in 2017. So at the time, I'm like, these are amazing. I've got cash to splash, and I want to get these. How much are they? They're 14,000, and I go, ooh, okay. I haven't heard about the company keys, and 14 grand for a company I haven't heard with speakers that have DSP on them. That spells a little bit of, like, there's a risk there. I didn't want to spend 14 grand on a speaker for a company to go bust or DSP to go crappy or have issues, especially in Australia being so far away from everything. It's really, really, really difficult to get service on any pro audio hardware. Like, companies who do a good job of it, hats off to you, but for the most part, we cop a bit of a bad stick here in Australia. So 14,000 Australians, about 8-9 USD. Probably less at the time based on the dollar. So I said no. And I completely regretted that, because Key has been a company that has stuck around up until this day and absolutely killing it. They're a great speaker. Now, the Neumanns. Why the Neumanns? I worked with all ported speakers before the Neumanns, and in my room, to get the low end right, it was really difficult because you always had this slightly exaggerated, bumpy low end wherever the portal resonance was. The Neumann KH310's completely sealed. I heard them in my space, fell in love. I'm still using them to this day. And I have never felt the temptation to upgrade, but I have explored the options of upgrading. The ATCs, no, not felt tempted to upgrade to them. The PMCs, yes, I have felt tempted slightly, because in 2022 I heard the 6.2s and the 8.2s when they came out, and the low end, it's like, how do I put it? They're very exciting speakers to listen to. I haven't, though, heard them in a studio setting and used them in a studio setting. So that's sort of the issue for me. So when it comes to, like, if you're taking away anything from this, it would be get the speakers in your studio and use them. Don't just upgrade blindly based on brand name or what I'm telling you here. Really get them in your own space and use them for yourself. All these speakers work for many producers and engineers I've worked with. All of them. Like, I can list at least 10 producers and engineers that each have used, like, Neumanns, and another 10 that use ATC or PMC and keys, and they all produce great mixes. Ultimately, it's what works for you, the individual. And speaking of monitoring and gear, we're going to get into plugins now, because somebody's asked me my favorite plugin of all time. Now, I'm going to rate this on this. Which plugin has lived in my sessions for the longest period of time? That would be ProQ. It has, of all time, it has lived on the most amount of sessions, probably like 95% of sessions, 90% of sessions I've done in the studio. And yeah, that's my favorite plugin of all time, ProQ. Speaking of plugins, let's talk about the latest Ozone, because somebody asked, did you like the new IRC5 on iZotope Ozone 12? Yes, absolutely. Go check out my video mastering the Lysander track. Okay, that's 2-3 videos ago. And what's beautiful about it is that somebody actually said it's multi-band. I don't like, there's a multi-band component to it, but it's not necessarily multi-band. If, let's say, you have a snare cutting through a vocal, okay, it will only limit the snare portion and not duck and gain reduce the vocals that are there, which I think is incredible. Now let's go a step deeper into gain staging and limiting philosophies, because somebody's asked, limiting at the start of the chain, are you for or against it? Now, I, for a long time, used to clip at the start of my chain with this sort of mentality. If all the transients are exactly the same coming into my chain, especially for dynamic processing, then that dynamic processor is going to react completely consistently to all those peaks. No. And here's why. Like on a technical level, if you had a peak controlled compressor, yes, that only responded to peaks but not average volume, and all the attack and release parameters were set perfectly for that, okay, technically yes, that would work, but it defeats the purpose of why we use clipping. Well, because clippers are a tool for headroom. If you put them at the start of the chain and then you start processing after the fact, you introduce differences in phase, in filtering, in processing, and that headroom that you thought yourself you bought yourself at the start, because that headroom comes at a very expensive cost. When you're clipping, you're introducing harmonics, you're compromising the signal. So you compromise the signal for the gain of headroom, then you process it to lose the headroom, to then have to get the headroom back again and re-limit it. So in the idea of putting a limiter at the start of the chain, no, because it's not what a limiter's for. At least in my view, I think it works really badly against you as a mastering engineer, or against the process of mastering a record, if you using that tool to get headroom. So like as in you're limiting, even if it's for a sound, quote unquote, still you can get a sound using other tools. You're getting headroom for what? Then to chew it up, filtering the signal again, to then have to get that headroom again to make it loud? No. All right? No. And that perfectly connects to the next question, which is one of the biggest questions in mastering: loudness. And this one wasn't really about mastering specifically. It was like, how loud should each bus be? Well, each bus should be as loud as it needs to be. I think if you're mixing with numbers, like you're mixing a record and you're looking how loud this lufs is of the drums, or the lufs of the guitar, or the lufs of the vocal, and trying to create an arc with that, it simply won't work, because a lufs is a weighted measurement based on a two-stage filter, one with a second pass, a second order high pass filter, and then a high shelf. So you're always filtering the signal. And if the musical content, if the arrangement content, if the production, the sound design fits that filter in one song, you're going to get very different numbers to another song, which is much more duller or warmer or brighter. You're always going to have different numbers to work with. So there's no ideal lufs for your buses to be at, or ideal loudness technically for your buses to be at. And that brings to the next one: bass and low end control or goals. Now, I'm going to do this as a checklist of goals for really good bass. Okay. First thing is, your bass needs to balance to your top end. So it doesn't matter what compression or multiband or saturation you do. If your low end doesn't balance to your top end, who cares? It's going to sound shit. So the two have to play together. That doesn't always mean moving the bass around. Sometimes that means moving the top end around. So those two have to work together. The next one is, in making them work together, they work together consistently. Bass lines will go through different chord progressions. Make sure those different notes it's hitting, that it's bouncing around, if it's got a little lick that goes an octave up or comes an octave down, that the loudness is maintained. Likewise with the top end. I know I'm talking about top end, but we're talking about low end, and top end changes your perception of the low end. If you've got lots of sibilance, if you've got a really gnarly hi-hat, if you've got a lot of edginess in a guitar, tame it. Control it, so it balances out. And once you get the low end right, that usually flows naturally to loudness. And this question's an awesome one: how to go beyond loud. How do you go beyond loud? You don't. Like, it's this weird thing where, to make a loud record, you have to make a good record. So focus on making a good record first, the loudness follows. You make a cruddy record, doesn't matter how loud you make it, it's still a cruddy record. So focus on the impact of the sonics of the sound. How hard does it hit? How is the low end balanced with the top end, like we just spoke about? Where's the vocal sitting? How much depth is there to it? How many gaps are there? Is there like something that's like feeling a bit scooped out? Think of that. And then you'll be able to get final master that really hits home nicely. Now, this next question is, how do you envisage each song and its post-master version? So I think what they're trying to ask here is, when I hear a mix, how do I foresee it's going to be as a master? Well, when it comes to listening to people's mixes, I like to... Actually, this has been pretty much the same for the last decade of working. Obviously, there's a communication element with the client and understanding what they need and what they want, but ultimately it's the first pass. The first pass tells me everything. When I do the first pass, I press play and I just listen. Like, as in, not like listen for sibilance or any particular resonant frequencies. I listen as a listener, like somebody in a car, somebody going to a game, somebody working out of the gym. I just listen. And if something pulls me in, something's exciting me, I take note. I'll take note of that. If something is pushing me away or I'm really not liking, I'm like, what? I want to turn this down. Why is that sibilance so loud? I'm not listening for the sibilance, but it's just so offensive. I take note of that as well. So the first pass dictates a lot for me because I'm not listening as an engineer, quote unquote. I'm listening as a listener just to see what pulls me in and pushes me away. Now for some fun questions. Sugar and salt to balance flavors. How does that work? Well, let's think of sugar like saturation. It adds body, like thickness and sweetness, and salt adds clarity. Like if you got something that just that tastes a bit bland, a little bit of a boost with an EQ, making something a bit more clearer, that's salt. Too much sweetness masks the salt, too much salt masks the sweetness. And now we're going to get to the strangest question of all time. Could Jesus microwave a burrito so hot he couldn't eat it? That depends. If he microwaved that burrito to -4 lufs, probably not. He could not eat that. All right, I answered that. You happy? Now, let's wrap it up. 40,000 subscribers, some amazing questions, and I just want to share with you guys my absolute gratitude for coming along on this journey with me. This community has taught me so much, and one of the most beautiful things has not only been me making videos and documenting my journey, but also learning from you guys. I love, probably the highlight of this channel for me has been learning through your interactions with me. Whether it's a DM on Instagram, whether you've told me something in an email, or whether you've just pushed back in the comment section telling me 100 times, because I can be stubborn, no, you're wrong, do this, and probably takes me 6-7 months to get on board, or 4 or 5 different comments from different people to realize. But that learning through this documenting experience has been incredible. So I just want to say thank you guys, and until next time, take care.